I suppose it's safe to say that I like these movies. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below, and it's going to give you an overview of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. In short, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore. And that's what we're doing today. We're doing it on our Horror Movie Supplement, which was an additional 100 subgenres to the original 100 subgenres on the Horror Movie Syllabus. And the supplement has a little bit more of a niche feel to it. It's a little bit more esoteric. It's a little bit more geared to me. It's stuff that I find interesting as opposed to a little bit more general subgenres that we had on the original syllabus. And this is a very good example of that, because today we're looking at the After Dark Horrorfest films. And the After Dark Horrorfest films are films that were shown during the After Dark Horrorfest Film Festival, which was an annual film festival that lasted from 2006 to 2008, and then they did it again in 2010, and then one last time in 2015. And what they would do is they would show 8 independent horror films that, were maybe looking for distribution, were not maybe going to be seen as well. And they would show them theatrically at this film festival. And then, maybe they'd get a little bit more exposure, a little bit more word of mouth. And then they would eventually release them on home media. And that's kind of where I found them. Actually, I fell in love with the After Dark Horror Fest, not because I went to it, because unfortunately, I never got to go and attend the actual film festival, much to my chagrin. I found them on DVD because I was an avid DVD collector, still am, frankly. And I bought these and I love them. And look, they're not always the most amazing movies. They are kind of, hit and miss. But, and then they're, like I said, they're mostly lower budget independent films. And so you kind of like get a mixed bag of things here. But I love them. I admit I might be being a little bit more forgiving to them because of their origins, because of their kind of ambitions. And so I maybe grade a little bit on a curve there. But I do tend to really like the movies that came out of this festival quite a bit. And I've actually talked about a few of them already on the syllabus. Some of them found their ways into other subgenres. Off the top of my head, like Lake Mungo being an obvious one that came out, but also Frontiers, I think the final I did recently. So there's a few of them that I've already talked about. So I won't be talking about them here because I don't repeat movies. But I'm going to talk about some of my favorites from the After Dark Horror Fest, and I'm going to rank them in undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate like I normally do. But in this case, I'm just going to do them in order of how much I like them, because this is really, like I said, it's a niche genre for me. I really like this. I know it's got its fans out there too. It's small, but there's a small little cult following for people who love these movies, and I'm one of them. So let's go ahead and if you're not familiar with them, I'm about to tell you a little bit about them. So let's go ahead and dig into the After Dark Horror Fest. The first After Dark Horror Fest movie we're looking at today, the undergraduate level selection, is The Abandoned. The Abandoned came out in 2006, and I'm going to give the years that they came out in the film festival, because some of these actually got a slightly earlier release by a few months in like a local film festival or something like that, but we're just going to go with the After Dark Horror Fest dates on these. And this one was directed by Nacho Cerda, and he is a Spanish director, which is a little bit interesting because this movie takes place in Russia, and it's got an English woman as the star, and it's in English and Russian. And it's a little bit interesting that it's a Spanish director, but it is the only movie that got an actual wider theatrical release after the festival. Out of all the movies in the festival, this is the only one that was released theatrically after the festival. So that's kind of noteworthy there. And is there a reason why that one got the theatrical release? Well, we're going to get into that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about this British woman who's adopted, and she's 40 now, and she's going to Russia because she's been told that she's inherited some property from her family that she never knew, her biological family. And she's going to this farm that she has inherited, but it seems kind of mysterious. The locals there seem kind of off-putting. And when she gets there, it's really dilapidated and weird. And she meets what is apparently her twin brother that she didn't know she had. And they are exploring the house together and figuring out what's going on, as there's a dark family past history and hijinks abound. And we're going to go ahead and stop there so as not spoil the mystery for you. but the movie is really quite cinematic looking. And I think that's part of why it got that theatrical release, which some of the After Dark Horrorfest movies can look a little cheaper because they're low budget. This one looks very theatrical, very cinematic. It looks really good. I would describe this as kind of like an art house film meets Lionsgate Pictures, right? It's not like a big studio, but it looks like a studio production in terms of production value. It looks good. It's shot very well. It's lit very well. The sets look good. It's not a lot of settings, but the locale is really interesting. It's set in Russia, and they're using the Russian countryside and kind of like the poor areas of Russia to kind of add this atmosphere to it. And you'll find that the word atmosphere is what gets used a lot when talking about this movie. In fact, when you look at critics' reviews, which are mixed to bad, if I'm being honest, they're not the best reviews. The focus is on the style of this movie. A lot of people, well, a lot of critics would say that it's style over substance. I wouldn't agree with that, but I can see what they're talking about because it does have a lot of style to it. The way it's shot, the mood that it's setting. This is very much a mood piece. And it's very slow. It's a slow burn. It's very deliberately paced. And that's, I think, by design to kind of let this feeling of unsettled, off-putting strangeness sink in, which works for me really well because this woman's going to Russia. She hasn't been there before. She's kind of like, she doesn't speak the language and she's a little uncomfortable about everything. And that's how I feel. I don't like to travel. And so like, I would feel like she was feeling, so I was relating to that character in that sense that it's just kind of like weird being in a foreign country and not knowing anything. And then you supposedly own land here, but you don't really know because like you don't know your family background, your family history. And that's where the movie's trying to go story-wise, is kind of exploring the ideas of identity and family history and family trauma and generational trauma maybe. And just trying to like find yourself or uncover your past and whether or not that makes sense and like, does it do you good to dig into that? That's what I think the movie is tackling and admittedly slowly. Right. So I can see why some people get put off by that because the themes I think are very interesting, but they're not, they take their time getting to them. They take their time unspooling that and getting to where they want to go. And it really works for me. I feel like this sense of unease permeates the entire film. Like I feel this kind of uneasy feeling throughout the entire movie. And then as the movie goes on, things start to pop off a little bit more. It becomes a little bit more of a scare fest with some jump scares like that. But honestly, it really eschews jump scares in favor of mood, in favor of kind of trying to be creepy and setting a certain tone. And I think it does it very well. That said, it does have some scary stuff in there that has the zombie doppelgangers, which I find to be very interesting. This idea that these doppelgangers of you, but they're like zombified, and if you do something to them, it actually hurts you as well. That's a neat idea. I hadn't seen that before. It may not be the most original thing, but I hadn't seen it. And I like that. So that's, giving a little bit more of the traditional scary stuff. And the way they have this house that's kind of shifting back and forth between dilapidated current state and like a past state where it's like, in good shape and good repair. That's interesting. It's kind of toying with time travel a little bit. It's not really a time travel movie, but it's kind of toying with that idea a little bit, and it's lending it the ability to kind of explore past and past family stuff in a way that still narratively works and keeps the story going and keeps the kind of tension going and stuff like that. So this movie was really working for me. Like I said, not everybody feels the same way. I think a lot of people feel like it took a little too long to get to where it was going, but I was enjoying the ride. I was enjoying the stylish, cool, deliberate, tension-filled direction of the movie. I really liked it. It's helped by the strong lead of Anastasia Hill, who I'm not super familiar with, but we've talked about her in The Awakening. We talked about that movie, and she was in that. She's also in like Snow White and the Huntsman. She's been in a few things, but I don't really recognize her. I think she's got small roles in a lot of them. This is like her first lead role for her, I think. And she's good here. She kind of gives like a little bit of an Elizabeth Moss vibe. She's really strong and really good here, and you're with her the entire time. You're over her shoulder. So it's important that she kind of carry the movie a little bit, and she does. So I'm really enjoying the ride. I'm really enjoying the whole experience. So I never feel like it is taking too long or that I'm getting bored or that I'm waiting for something to happen, because I feel like the mystery is compelling enough and the feel of the movie, the mood of the movie is keeping me engaged. I will admit that it's going for a psychological horror thing, and as a result, the narrative starts to feel a little bit confusing. It's a little bit hard to follow. Sometimes motivations don't make a lot of sense, and sometimes you're not entirely clear on where it's going or what's supposed to be happening or what you're supposed to be understanding. But I think by the end it came together. At least I feel like it does. And so I feel like the reviews, the negative reviews, are a little unfair. I think this movie is quite good. I understand why it got a theatrical release. I think it's a very good movie. I definitely think it's an underrated movie. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend checking it out. Again, just be aware, it's a slow burn. It's going to take its time getting where it wants to go. So if that's not your bag, if you're in need for something a little bit more visceral, a little bit more adrenaline pumping, this one might not be for you. But if you like a good slow-paced mystery, some family trauma stuff, some ghostly zombie stuff, you might be into this one. And I would definitely say check it out if you haven't seen it already. The next After Dark Horror Fest movie we're looking at today, the graduate level selection is Reincarnation. Reincarnation came out in 2006 in the 2006 Film Festival and was directed by Takashi Shimizu, who you may recognize the name from him as the director of The Grudge, Ju-on, actually the original Japanese version of The Grudge. And that's kind of noteworthy, especially when you kind of see some of the themes that are being tackled in this movie as well. It makes sense that Shimizu is the one who's doing this one. And I've got to point out, 2006 is the American debut of this movie in the film festival, because it did come out in 2005 in a Japanese film festival that was kind of driving around certain similar themes, but then it wound up in the After Dark Horror Fest for its international/US release. So that's why we're going with that date. Now, if you haven't seen it before, the movie focuses on an actress who's gotten a role in a movie that's a kind of a true crime movie that's exploring this murder of a family by this professor in a hotel. He holed up in this hotel and he wound up killing his entire family and kind of going insane, and he filmed it. And so they're making a movie about this tragedy. And of course they want to film in the actual hotel where things happen, but when they do that, the actress starts to see very interesting visions and ghostly things, and hijinks start to abound. And of course we'll stop there so as not spoil the movie for you. But this movie has a setup that is very J-horror, but also should be very familiar to horror fans with some of its other very obvious influences. So, first and foremost, it's got the J-horror thing going on. It's got a lot of the J-horror tropes that we've talked about. When we talked about J-horror on the channel, we talked about some of the tropes. Creepy children, really strange noises, ghosts. There's like a lot of things that just seem to pop up in J-horror that make it kind of feel decidedly J-horror. And this is going right along that vein. It's right in that vein. And it's Takashi Shimizu, so it's also got this whole imprint of a bad act, kind of putting a curse or leaving a curse on a particular space. Is very Grudge, very much Ju-on in that sense, that this hotel has like this imprint of the horrible acts that were occurring in there. And so it's got that vibe going on it as well, which is working for it. This is definitely really selling me completely. I like J-horror. This is working for me. And the movie's really well made. It's shot very, very well. It's got a wonderful score that really just adds to the atmosphere. It's really working for me. It works in some really creepy imagery. It's got some creepy dolls and creepy kids and stuff like that. So all this stuff is working for me really well. And then narratively speaking, it's a little bit disjointed narratively. Like it kind of jumps around a little bit, which I find to be kind of the case for J-horror films. Like narratively, they can just kind of jump a little bit and you just kind of have to roll with it a little bit or kind of keep up. And this does the same thing there. But the themes that they're tackling, these themes of reincarnation that are kind of tied into a little bit about Buddhism and maybe a little bit of Shintoism in there, which I don't really know anything about Shintoism. I know a little bit about Buddhism, but the way that they're kind of approaching the afterlife and stuff like that, and theological or spiritual ideas is interesting. It's kind of heady. It's kind of taking it a little bit deeper than, say, like something like The Ring, where it's just a curse. It's trying to do something a little bit more than that. Whether or not it's totally successful, maybe a little bit debatable, but for me, I really like that they were trying to go there and trying to make something interesting out of it. But where really I think this movie shines is in its influences, really, frankly. So it's got these Super 8 films of the killings, the original killings that the guy committed. And it very sinister vibe in that sense. Now, I think this movie actually might have come out before Sinister. I don't remember, but I think it did. But it does have that kind of vibe to it, where you're seeing like these whole home movies that have really horrible things on there. But the obvious one, the obvious influence is The Shining. And they're not even being shy about it. They actually show room 237 in the hotel, right? They are very obviously being playing homage to The Shining, and it works really well, because what you've got then is J-horror meets The Shining, and I'm here for that. That really very much works for me, and it's the big reason why I like this movie. The other thing I really like about it is that Unlike some of the other J horror movies, I feel like this one really is willing to go there with some particularly super dark moments. Like you see kids getting killed in this movie, like you see it on screen, and there's some suicidal type aspects to this movie, and there's just like some shocking stuff here. It's not super gory or anything like that, but there's some disturbing images in this movie. It doesn't really pull the punch, and I thought that was really cool. I was not expecting that, and I was really surprised when I saw this movie that it was doing something a lot more than I felt like Ju-on did, for example. It kind of went an extra step farther in terms of kind of like taboo, uncomfortable, dark stuff, and I think that's really great. Of course, there's a lot of other things I like about the movie. It's got this kind of movie within a movie feel where they're making a movie. It's a movie about making a movie. That's always kind of fun to me. I like that they have the movie taking place in everyday Japan. It's not like just in Tokyo City. So you're seeing parts of Japan that aren't necessarily shown as much to Americans. Like Americans don't necessarily think of this when they think of Japan. And my wife just came back from Japan recently. She showed me all her pictures. So I'm like, yeah, this is the stuff you don't usually see. And this movie kind of takes place in those areas, which is kind of cool. And I like the true crime angle of it. This director who's making this movie has this fascination with true crime, and how morbid his fascination is part of the movie, and part of what's driving like maybe the ghost actions. And I also really like the kind of ambiguous way the movie kind of wraps up. So to me, there's a lot to like in this movie, and it is one of the more popular ones of the After Dark Horrorfest. So I obviously was going to talk about it here, but this is one that if you like J-horror, if you like Ju-on, things like that, this one is definitely one for you to check out for sure. If you don't like J-horror, I don't know that this one's going to change your mind on anything like that. It might be a little bit more accessible than the average J-horror. It's maybe a little bit more straightforward, and a little bit, more accessible in terms of narrative, but it's still going to have some of that kind of J-horror, almost ethereal weirdness to it. So that's your warning. But like I said, if you like these kind of movies, definitely check this one out. It's one of the better J horrors in my opinion. So I'm gonna go ahead and say check it out, and let me know what you think of it. And our last After Dark Horror Fest selection, the postgraduate level selection, is Dread. Dread came out in 2010. It was in the 2010 festival, and it's directed by Anthony DiBlasi, who maybe you'd recognize as the director of the movie Last Shift, which I'm not sure. I don't think we've talked about that on the channel yet, but we might be talking about it in the future. But this is his feature film debut here, and a lot of the people who, a lot of the movies that were in the After Dark Horror Fest were feature film debuts, and so it's one of the reasons why I like it so much, frankly. And he co-wrote and directed Dread here. And if you haven't seen it before, the movie centers on a group of film students who are making a student film documentary exploring what people dread the most, kind of a psychological exploration into people's fears. And one of the students is using it to kind of deal with his own trauma from when he watched his parents get murdered by an axe murderer as a kid. And it's obviously done something to him because he's got these psychotic tendencies, and the other people he's working with, the other students, are starting to realize that he might not be the safest person to be working on, and there's going to be a lot of problems. Hijinks are going to abound, but we're going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil it. This movie, though, is one that I think is a little bit polarizing for people who have seen the After Dark Horror Fest movies, but I think overall people tend to, I think the positives tend to outweigh the negatives in terms of people naysaying this, and I'm obviously one of the positive ones. I like this one quite a bit, in part because I like the feel of it. It's got a total indie feel. It feels like, honestly, very early 2000s movie. The lighting and the editing in this movie is very reminiscent of something like Saw, like the original Saw, and it works rather well. I like that kind of grimy look and that kind of ADD or ADHD kind of style editing. It works in this movie rather well, and it's littered with a bunch of really kind of cool but almost maybe posery 2000s cool characters. It's led by Jackson Rathbone of Twilight fame, as he's your main protagonist in this movie. He's the guy who's working with the potentially psychotic guy on the film, and he's really good here. He's really actually selling me on him being kind of a likable presence in this movie. And honestly, all the acting in the movie is actually pretty good in this. I really like the characters. Like I said, they're the kind of people that maybe would kind of normally annoy me, but the actors are doing a good job of being likable enough or accessible enough that they're not putting me off, even though like some of their decision making and some of their interests and stuff like that isn't really for me. I do think that it works out pretty well. And I think part of why this movie worked out for me, and kind of I'm kind of drawn to it, and I didn't know this at the time that I first saw it, is that it's based off one of the Books of Blood by Clive Barker. It's one of the short stories in the Books of Blood by Clive Barker, and I didn't realize that when I saw it. And honestly, it doesn't completely truthfully or totally like adhere to the story truthfully, faithfully. It kind of adds a lot of elements to it because it's making a short story into a feature length film, but it does it well. I like the stuff that was added to it. I think that it winds up coming out pretty darn good. I actually enjoy this movie quite a bit, and it's interesting because it's definitely delving into like a psychological aspect of this movie, like exploring dread and what people fear the most, getting in their deepest, darkest fears. It's literally what they're trying to do in the movie, and it's literally what the movie is trying to do for us, the audience. And I like that aspect of it, and I think that they're pretty successful in this. Now, it does slide into like kind of torture porn type stuff because 2000s, tis the season for that at that point. And even then, though, I think that the torture porny stuff is less like graphically violent than you might expect from like a torture porn movie, and again kind of still focusing more on the psychological aspect of it, but it's doing it really, really well. I really like the way that they tried to keep even the torture scenes focused on the trauma of the people, the psychological issues that they have that have scarred them. They're really pushing this dread and trauma over like jump scares and stuff like that. They do have some jump scares and stuff like that, but they're really wanting this to be a little bit deeper than just a torture porn movie. And I think they're really successful at it. It's not 100% perfect or anything like that. It's got some like mid CGI. Sometimes sometimes its budget is showing that it's not a very high budget movie. It looks a little low budget, but they do a lot with what little money they have. It does look good overall, and it does look stylish, and it does fit the tone of the movie, the way they've lit it and the way they've confined the spaces and everything like that. It all works really well. So I feel like they made their dollar stretch and they knew how to use it. There's a very strong hand here. De Blasi is doing a really good job with directing the movie. The dramatic moments in this movie actually work, and you wouldn't think they would, right? Kind of like a schlocky B movie horror like type thing, but it feels more than that because it does have some emotional weight to some of the characters, and there are these dramatic moments that I feel like they hit pretty well. And this movie gets really mean spirited, partly by giving you those dramatic moments, by giving you emotional beats for the characters that makes you invest in them and care about them, and then doing some really, really mean things to them, really mean spirited in a way that very much works. It made me care about the characters, and then it hurt them. And I think that is what makes for a movie that kind of sticks with you. And Dread sticks with me. This is one of the ones that really made an impression on me when I first saw it, like years and years and years ago. And so I knew that when I wanted to do After Dark Horrorfest for the channel, that this was going to be one of the ones that made the cut for sure, especially because movies like Mungo had already been used, Frontiers had already been used. Dread was going to definitely make the cut. And so this is maybe my favorite, probably my favorite of the After Dark Horrorfest that we haven't already talked about before. So obviously I'm going to recommend to you guys, but again, it's another one of those ones like if you're not into that kind of vibe, the kind of torture porny vibe, torture porn light, and that kind of 2000s feel, this one might not be for you, but I'd say give it a chance because this one, it's got ambitions that maybe don't totally get met, but I think they do a really pretty solid job of giving you something that's a cut above the normal 2000 schlock. So that's going to do it for our exploration into the After Dark Horror Fest. But of course, I've got some extra credit ones. I do really like this After Dark Horror Fest subgenre. I like these movies, so I'm going to talk about a few more and give you a few more suggestions to check out if you haven't seen them. And my first one is Wicked Little Things. Wicked Little Things came out in 2006 and was directed by J.S. Cardone, who you may recognize. He's done a lot of horror remakes. Like he did the remake of The Stepfather and the remake of Prom Night. He also is the person who did The Covenant, which I believe we talked about that on the channel. And so he's got horror bona fides, sort of. I mean, it depends on how you feel about those movies, I suppose. But Wicked Little Things is a good one, and it's kind of an indicative one of the entire festival. But we'll get into that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie starts like 100 years in the past and it explores this mine accident where they would use a bunch of children to like put dynamite into small spaces and stuff like that. And the mine accident killed all of these children. And then years and years and years and years and years later, there's the kind of dying town and out in the backwoods. And this woman and her two daughters inherit their husband's family's house there, and she goes there to kind of check it out, maybe move there and live there. And these kids start to visit the family, and hijinks start to abound. But I'm going to go ahead and stop there and not spoil the movie. But the strength of this movie for me is first and foremost the setting. This backwoods area, rural setting really lends itself to some creepy storytelling and some creepy imagery. It really sets it up in a pretty good way. This is a very competently, professionally made movie. Like I said, some of these movies on the After Dark Horrorfest can look a little cheap. This one doesn't. This one looks very professional. And it's got some really strong actors in there, most notably Scout Taylor Compton and Chloe Grace Moretz as the two children. Scout's a teenager in the movie, and Chloe's a little bit younger. She's like a preteen. Like maybe like 10 or 11, and they're playing siblings, and they're very believable. They're very strong. Like the mom is really good in this, and they really feel like a true family suffering from loss, right? The husband has died, the father has died, and he's left his house, and he never talked much about his family. And so that's lending itself to this mystery of like what happened in this town. Why wouldn't he talk about his family? What is like this kind of curse or whatever that's going on with this area? Why are the locals so weird? All of this stuff is kind of working out really well, but the heart of it is this family, which is the second thing I think is really strong about this movie. Is the acting really sells this family dynamic that is dealing with loss and grief, and then confronted with this mystery stuff and stuff that they don't really want to have to deal with. And there's like a financial aspect of it too, like, you know, can they afford to not live there? And all of this stuff is working really well for a grieving family, and it lends an extra layer of intrigue or care to the movie. So again, I get invested in the characters, I care about what's happening to them. And what's happening to them is they're being terrorized by what is described, and I think is technically accurate, as zombie children, but they really operate more like ghosts. So they're like zombie ghosts, really. And so that's an interesting twist on this. Like, most of, like, when you look at reviews or you look at summaries of this movie, they'll call it like a zombie movie, but it really doesn't feel like a typical zombie movie. The kids kind of act like zombies, but they act more to me like ghosts. And the whole idea of, you know, the whole mine accident and their reason for existing or still existing, it feels more ghost and haunting than it does a zombie thing. And honestly, the look of the kids really kind of lends itself to that too. Like, they're suitably creepy, but they don't feel very zombie-like. Like, the makeup is kind of mid, if I'm being honest with you, but not if they're being ghosts. Like, they're supposed to be zombies. They don't really look all that zombie-like. The makeup doesn't really do much, but if they're supposed to be ghosts, it does work really well. And honestly, kids ghost zombies, feels like a fresh thing to me. Like, it's not that scary, if I'm being honest with you. Like, the kids just don't really ever come off as super scary. But I do think the concept of these kid zombies and what they do to be pretty creepy. There's like some pretty creepy, bloody scenes in the movie that I think are very effective, and they work to kind of unnerve you more because of the fact that it's children involved. This one really works for me, and I gather it works for a lot of people too, because this is one that often comes up. If you're looking into After Dark Horrorfest, it feels like this is one of the ones that they show a lot as one of like the exemplars of that series of films. And so I can see why. It's a very accessible movie. It's pretty easy to kind of like get into the characters, get into the idea of it. It's not terribly complicated. It's a pretty simple story and pretty straightforward, and I think that works to its benefit. It really is just relying on the mood that it's setting and its cast and this family dynamic and the kind of interplay between the characters, and that works. It works really, really well. Keeping it simple, giving you a nice, simple, spooky story, kind of like a campfire story almost. Very, very effective. Very, very good. I like this movie quite a bit. Didn't quite make the cut for the supplement, but it's definitely one you should still check out. And like I said, this one's pretty accessible to anybody. I'd recommend this to anybody. So if you haven't seen it, check it out and let me know what you think. The next extra credit movie I want to mention is The Deaths of Ian Stone. And The Deaths of Ian Stone came out in 2007, so in the second film festival year that it came out. And it's directed by Dario Piana. And Dario's probably biggest claim to fame is maybe Lost Boys: The Thirst. So take that for what it is, if you will. This is, I think, better than that movie, but, you know, maybe the less said about that, the better. But this is an interesting premise, and we're going to get into it in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a man named Ian Stone, naturally, and what would happen is he would get attacked and killed by these entities, these creatures, and every time he does, he wakes up in a new life where he maybe has a little bit of a vague remembering of what he had previously, But ultimately, it's like he's a whole new person, and he's got to kind of figure out this mystery of why this keeps happening to him and what these creatures are that are attacking him, or else something really bad's going to happen to him and to the girl he cares about. But I'm going to stop there so as to not spoil it for you. But this movie is interesting because it's a really cool, intriguing premise. This idea of like not just coming back to life like Happy Death Day, but come back to life in a different life where you are a different person with a different job and different history, and the people in your life are different and they react to you differently is really interesting. However, it can be very disorienting if you don't know what the premise of the movie is. So the first time I saw this movie, I struggled with it at first because I was just like, what the hell is going on here? If you know going in what the movie's about, it's much easier to roll with that concept and kind of just get on board with it a lot quicker, because it is admittedly a bit of a slow burn of a movie. It doesn't really give you why the things are happening for quite a while. It doesn't tip its hand very early. It just kind of lets you sit at first in like the same feeling that Ian's having, like what is going on and why can't I figure it out and what am I going to do about it? Like you're as lost as Ian early on in the movie. And I think that's by design, and I think they did a really good job with it, but it does help a little bit if you know where it's going. And where it's going is honestly, in my opinion, pretty cool. You've got these creatures and they're not over explained, and I like that. They give you some explanation for it. There's the exposition, we'll get to the exposition in a second, but they give you some exposition to explain them, but they don't over explain it. They're still fairly mysterious, but they look cool. I would say they kind of look like maybe a cross between like Venom and like the smoke monster from Lost or something, like maybe a little Dementor-ish, like they have a really cool design. And apparently Stan Winston produced or co-produced this movie, so maybe that's a little bit of why the creatures look as good as they do, but they are good looking. The effects look pretty good. The production values of this movie in general are pretty good. Again, another one of these movies where the production values are high. This looks like a professionally made movie. It's lit well. It's shot well. The acting is good. The lead character, Mike Vogel, who plays Ian Stone, is very charming, and it's important because you're really with him. He needs to be likable, and he is. Even though he's kind of confused and lost for a lot of the movie, you're on his side. You like him. And Mike Vogel's been in a lot of stuff. I didn't even write down all the stuff that he's been in. He's done a lot of work, but he's good here. He's carrying this movie. It's on his shoulders, but his supporting cast is also really good here. Some recognizable faces, and everybody's doing a good job here. So they're selling you on this kind of fantastical premise, and they're drawing you in, and the effects solidify it. They make it really, really good so that it feels, if not real, at least believable. You're buying into it. Nothing about this movie in terms of production or the quality of it is going to take you out of the story. You're going to be right there in on it. The one knock on it I have is that it is very exposition heavy. Like they really couldn't think of a better way to show you what's going on. They have characters tell you what's going on. There's one character that is literally there just to deliver exposition to Ian Stone and by extension to you. And it's clunky, it is, but honestly, it's not ruinous. It doesn't screw up the movie for me. It's fine because everything else is firing on all cylinders. Everything else is working really good for me. Like I said, production value, acting, effects, story, concept, all of that's working really well for me. And like a little bit of the idea of like the themes of like, what does it mean when you have these different lives, and like what's important in life? What are the things that anchor you to reality? These are things that are kind of cool. And I really like that they did this so that I can forgive the exposition aspect of it, because I like what I'm getting. And I'm not alone, but the reviews are mixed. Like some people do really like this movie. It is one of the more popular After Dark Horrorfest movies, but there are a lot of people who don't like it. And I think it's just too slow for some people. I think some people couldn't get into it because it takes its time where it's going, but I don't mind that. I like this. I like the creatures. I liked Ian Stone, like Mike Vogel in it. All of this is working for me. So this is another one that I'd say I could recommend to anybody. I don't think that you have to have any caveats with it. I'd recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it. Check it out. And of course, if you have seen it, let me know what you think, because like I said, it's a little bit of mixed reviews, but I seem to find that people really like this one. So hopefully you do too. And the last extra credit movie I want to talk about is Autopsy. Autopsy came out in 2008, and that was the third film festival of the After Dark Horror Fest. And it was directed by Adam Girish. And this is his feature film debut, but he is probably better known as a filmmaking duo with his wife, Jace Anderson. The two of them together have made movies independently and together, and they're kind of known as a filmmaking pair. In fact, if you look up on Wikipedia, they list them as a pair. And Adam also has done some acting. I think he actually acts in this movie. And so he's kind of a jack of all trades here. He does a lot of things here, but what he's done in Autopsy is pretty interesting. But we're going to get into it in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, The movie follows a group of friends partying at Mardi Gras, and then when they leave and they're driving home or driving wherever they're going, they hit somebody and he's injured. And before they can even call for help, an ambulance shows up and takes them all to a nearby hospital. The thing is, when they get to the hospital, it seems severely understaffed. It's a little bit creepy and weird. People are acting strange, and they're not really getting clear updates on what's going on. And something definitely doesn't feel right, but they realize they might not be able to get out, and things might go horribly, horribly wrong for them. Hijinks start to abound, but of course, we're going to stop there and not spoil it for you. But this movie is interesting for a number of reasons. But one of the big ones, right off the bat, is the cast. There's a lot of notable name actors in this for a movie that is clearly pretty low budget. You've got Robert Patrick, you've got Jeanette Goldstein, you've got Robert Lasardo, Michael Bowen, Ross McCall's in this. Jessica Lowndes is your star. She's from 90210. I think this is her first feature film. I'm a Jessica Lowndes fan. Yes, I watched 90210, the remake even. Yes, I did, because that's kind of my taste, whatever. But Jessica Lowndes, I really like her, and she's really good here too. And she's the main character that you're following here, but this is kind of a weird thing because you've got all these characters, well, kind of maybe arguably too many characters, but it's working partly because a lot of them are recognizable faces like Robert Patrick and Jeanette Goldstein and stuff. But here's a weird thing. Lots of talent on the screen, not the best acting on the screen. The acting is a little bit mid. It's not really quite right, but it fits the vibe of the movie because the vibe of the movie is off intentionally. It's supposed to be weird and creepy and unsettling and off-putting, and the acting being so spotty at best, it kind of fits with it. It kind of does, because this movie, I'll come up and stand up front. This movie's playing it kind of tongue-in-cheek. You don't realize it at first, but as the movie goes on, you realize it's not taking itself terribly seriously. And I think the actors are on board with that, and I think the performances are leaning into that aspect. That this movie is tongue firmly in cheek, kind of not taking itself seriously, kind of trying to be fun, not full on like comedy or camp, but really not taking itself terribly seriously. And that makes sense because this premise is implausible. This idea of there's this hospital that is understaffed and is doing all this incredibly crazy stuff, and with only a handful of people is no way. There's no way. There's no way. But if you give it that premise, it's a lot of fun, because where this movie starts to get fun is in the really gory stuff that happens. So you've got like this creepy hospital, and again, it's really well. This movie's cheap, and you can kind of tell it's cheap, but they're doing a bang up job with making it work with what they have, and then they're selling that kind of mood, and that creep factor. And then when they dig into the gore, it's good. This is where the movie shines. The aesthetic goes from this creepy, cold hospital setting to bloody and gory and warm and sticky, like real fast. And like and it's good sticky gore too. If you're a gore hound, I think you'll be served here. It's not the most amazing, but on a budget like this, and you can tell by looking at the movie what this budget's like. I was shocked by how good the gore effects were on this movie. They really sell this movie, and it's a big part of why I enjoy it as much as I do. The violence in this movie winds up being pretty darn disturbing. And it's like, and again, I'm going to admit the character work here is thin. It's not doing the kind of things that like Wicked Little Things or Ian Stone did, where they're kind of getting you to care about the characters as much. This is kind of more like slasher-ish in that sense. It's not really a slasher film exactly, but it's kind of got that sensibility because it's really going to revel in the kills, and it really is giving you fodder rather than characters for the most part. Like even the main characters that you care about aren't really that deep. Jessica Lowndes is not that deep. And again, the performances aren't really all that deep either, but I think it's fine for this movie. It works for this movie. And in fact, it lends itself to that kind of surreal, off-putting, weird feel that this movie has throughout the entire film. It just feels weird and off the entire time, and I love it. I think it's great. It's another one of these movies that's gotten mixed reviews, but I think that the people that like this movie like it for the same reasons I like. It's just kind of weird and off-putting and a little bit goofy and really gory and fun. And that's what it is. It's trying to have fun. Don't think too hard about it. Don't try to, rationalize it too much. Don't get too nitpicky about the performances or the setting or the sets or any of that, or like the plausibility of this hospital and all of its equipment being accessible the way it is. Forget about all of that. Just turn all that off and just enjoy these people trying to escape this scary hospital, because it really is a lot of fun to watch them do this. This is another one that, like I said, has a little bit of a cult following, but even though the reviews on there are kind of mixed, some people don't like this one, and maybe for the same reasons I do like it. But it is one that if you're into kind of gory stuff or weird, like kind of off, like strange offbeat movies, this one might be for you. Again, I can say it's not for everybody, but it's for me. And if it's for you, let me know in the comments below. And if it's definitely not for you, if you saw it and you didn't like it, let me know that in the comments also, because I find it to be interesting to hear different opinions on this thing. But honestly, Autopsy, I really like it. So that's going to do it for my exploration into the After Dark Horrorfest. I've been wanting to do this for quite some time now. There are more movies. We'll probably talk about them at some other point in time, because it's just, I really enjoy these movies. Like I said, they're not all necessarily top tier or A-level movies, but I just enjoy them so much, and that's why I've got all the DVDs, and that's why I've used them in the different areas of the supplement. I just really enjoy these movies. I really like these movies, and I kind of think more people should check them out and see them. But now it's time to check out a Horror Trivia Pursuit card. It's that time that I read a question off a Trivia Pursuit card live on camera, hopefully answer it correctly. And given that several of the movies we talked about today have monsters in them, we're going to go with the monster category in the card. And our question is this: protagonist Graham Hess in 2002's Signs is which of the following? Doctor, lawyer, priest, or former baseball player? Okay, I know this one for sure. You know, I love me some M. Night Shyamalan, and Signs is one of his absolute bests. We have talked about it on the channel, and I have seen it many, many times. I love it. And the real thing about this question is knowing who Graham Hess is. Because if you've seen the movie, there are two protagonists. And the question is, which one is Graham Hess? And I know, I remember, I know this, 100% know this question. In fact, I would argue this question would have been better if they didn't give you the multiple choice. But I think the multiple choice is kind of interesting in the sense that they gave you certain choices in the multiple choice that could lead you astray and make you confused and get the wrong answer. But I'm not going to go into it too much till after I give you my answer. But I do like that they, at least with the multiple choice, they tried to be a little bit sneaky about it. But I still think it would have been an easier, more interesting, and a harder question if they had just foregone the multiple choice and just ask you what the profession of the main character was. But that's all we're going to go into that. Time for you to lock in an answer on this one. If you've seen Signs, my guess is this should be a 50-50 guess for you. There's a clue. But if you haven't seen it, you're just taking a guess. You've got a 1 in 4 chance at that point. So lock in an answer. Good. Okay. The answer for me is a priest. He is a priest. And I'm going to double check on the card. He is priest. Just says priest. And yeah, so the thing that's fun about this is that Graham Hess is Mel Gibson's character, and his brother Merrill, I remember the names, I've seen this enough time. Merrill is a former professional baseball player. And so by putting that as one of the choices, they're trying to get you to get confused and think that they're talking about Joaquin Phoenix's character, Merrill, rather than Mel Gibson's character. So that was pretty fun. That's pretty good. So for a multiple choice question, not too bad. But that's going to do it for our video today. If you got a wrong answer, let me know in the comments. But I'm guessing it's not that interesting because it's multiple choice. But let me know if you've seen any other After Dark Horrorfest movies, and if you think they should have been here on this list. And if you're more interested in what they are about and want to see more, let me know about that too. We'll talk about it in the comments below. Next week we'll be doing something a little bit different. But until then, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.